growing up in the 90s, first generation Afghan American, I always felt like my dad was just a little overly strict, and I just felt like he just didn't want me to have fun. And one of his rules were that we weren't allowed to watch The Simpsons, you know? He felt like the relationship between the idiotic father and the glorified, disrespectful son wasn't the best influence on like an impressionable child. And I got a little bit older, I have a young nephew, and if God forbid I ever have children of myself, I don't think I would feel too comfortable with them watching the show either. Not because of the same reasons my dad had, but because of the racist depiction of one of the characters on the show. Now, I know what some of you guys are thinking, like, oh my God, why is everyone so sensitive nowadays, But my argument to that is, I don't think we're sensitive. I just think we've gotten to a point where we just don't want to tolerate racist bullshit anymore, right? So I highly encourage you guys to check out Hari Kondabolu's documentary, The Problem with Apu, where he explores that much more deeper. So I've been in the entertainment industry for a few years, and I've just been like falling in love with cinema and film. And the more I fell in love with it, the more I just began to pick up on the depiction of minorities in media, how Arabs and Muslims and other racial groups were being stereotyped. We're either depicted as your stereotypical terrorist, we're these overly sexual men that beat their women and try to keep them in harems. We're randomly screaming Allahu Akbar and shouting other anti-Muslim sentiments. Or we're these goofy characters with accents that come from third world countries. 9/11, post 9/11, watching film, I would always see these characters that looked like my grandfather. They would dress like him. And I would feel sympathetic towards them until they would carry out some terrorist attack. And I want to go back to that statement of everyone is so sensitive nowadays. I just want to ask you to look a little bit deeper and think a little bit more critically about that. See, media plays a huge role in how we're conditioned to hate ourselves. We're conditioned to hate our skin, we're made to hate our names because it's weird, it's different, it's hard to pronounce. And when we're in these, and with the lack of representation, and when we're in these vulnerable states, struggling with our hyphenated identities, the lack of proper representation, and the comfort of our dual identities, we do begin to see ourselves as that goofy Quickie Mart owner or that angry Arab. And that gives others more legitimacy in targeting us as that. So I'm frustrated, I'm whatever, I go to my professor and I'm like, hey man, this is what's going on, and he's like, symbolic annihilation. Symbolic, what? Huh? He's like, just look it up, symbolic annihilation. And I'm surprised to say it has nothing to do with Mortal Kombat annihilation. And I was ashamed that I even had to Google that. But it actually is the absence of representation or underrepresentation of a certain group of people in media based on their race, sex, sexual orientation, their socioeconomic status, and it's a way of continuing social inequality. So the professor who coined, George Gerbner, the professor who coined this term, and I know that's not George Gerbner, I don't know why I felt like I should put my face over his quote. I'm sorry. But he stated that representation in the fictional world, oh my God, I don't even realize why I gave myself a death date. I'm sorry. Representation in the fictional world signifies social existence. Absence means symbolic annihilation. And the absence of representation is just as harmful as an inaccurate representation. So let's just say media continues to depict nurses as only women, and male nurses are absent, and women doctors are absent. Society begins to reflect that stigma and gender roles are pushed forward. So I'm sure by now you can kind of understand what's going through a young Afghan American child's mind, where his neighborhood doesn't look like him, his school doesn't understand him, and when he comes home, he's not represented in what he sees in television. And you really just begin to feel erased from the social fabrics of this country. And New York is like what? The most diverse city in the entire world, yet every sitcom that's based out of there, or every trash Woody Allen film that we shouldn't be watching anyway, has 0 characters of color, right? And that brings me to my next point, that representation does not equal justice. You know? So let's just say more characters of color and people of color are casted as leads, and the characters have just deep backgrounds and rich character arcs. That's not gonna solve the racial and political and social injustices that minorities face. And that's a completely different topic for another day, for another speaker. But all right, think about this. In the height of the war on drugs, in the 70s and in the 80s, that targeted black communities. And then in the 90s, during the wave of mass incarceration of black men and women, the Jeffersons were on air, The Cosby Show, Good Time, In Living Color, Living Single, Fresh Prince, Family Matters. The list goes on, and black sitcoms did not solve systematic oppression. And I don't want you to think just because we're up here promoting accurate representation that it's the end-all, be-all. So that brings me to one of my last points. How many of you guys here watch Hamilton or listen to Hamilton or are a Hamilton fan? Yeah, okay, awesome. I'm gonna make a Hamilton reference. So Hamilton, Act 2, Aaron Burr realizes that these big decisions are happening behind closed doors in the room where it happens. And he's like, yo, I gotta be in the room where it happens. And, you know, many of you guys love the entertainment industry. Most of you might even want to be in it. But you might feel like, okay, maybe I'm not an actor, I'm not a writer, I'm not a director, I didn't go to film school, but I just want to let you know that the gatekeepers in Hollywood, the decision makers, the executives, the studio heads didn't go to film school. They didn't go to art school, they don't have film degrees or art degrees. They went to law school. They went to business school. They have degrees in marketing, in accounting, in economics, in HR, and communication. You know, you don't have to be a creative to be in the creative industry. And my theory, or I shouldn't say theory, but my thought and my opinion is that if we can get more people of color in these rooms and to be a part of these discussions, and the more we can take up space, more people of color can take up space in creative spaces, in boardrooms, in writers' rooms, the less white supremacy will be pumped out for consumption. And it's crazy how just now in 2016, 17, Hollywood's kind of like picking up that like, okay, maybe diversity and representation is good because there's viewership in that and there's profits in that. And it took them so long just because of the power structures that were set in place for centuries lacked diversity. And that's why some of your favorite shows only have white leads and writers and actors, you know? So I think it's important now to discuss this more than ever because of the whole boom in social media. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram has created this platform that got rid of all gatekeepers. Now, anyone with a cell phone or a smartphone or an iPhone or a laptop can be a content creator. And now some of our biggest influencers are people of color. Now these creators can talk, they can act, they can sing, they can do whatever they want to do and upload it to an audience of millions without going through any channels of approval. And that's what we kind of try to do with my podcast, The Apartment with Asif and Baluch. Shameless plug, check it out, subscribe. We're on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play. But we try to create space for diverse voices and try to create digital communities that are actually inclusive. You know, my request to creatives, the powers that be, writers, if you want to write about the minority experience, and if you're a man trying to write about women, my suggestion is let them tell their own stories. You're never going to do it justice, and it's experiences that you will never be able to share. So it's just best to let us tell our own stories, right? We're not asking, and I'm not here asking for positive images. We don't want positive images. We want empowering images. And I think, at the end of the day, the people that will benefit from diversity and representation the most is like white folks, you know? Like, at the end of the day, it challenges you and gives you a perspective that's different of your own, of your little echo chambers that you have. And then it shows you how brown and black people and people of color view the world. See, movies aren't real, but they affect real people. And I've always believed this, that kids need heroes that look like them. And it's our job to create them. Thank you.